Hey everybody, my name is Matt MacArthur. I'm running for Congress in the Texas 13th Congressional District, which for those of y'all who don't know covers the Panhandle, Amarillo, that area, all the way across the Oklahoma border to I-35 and in Gainesville, kind of north of Fort Worth. The purpose of these videos is so I can take a few minutes and talk about issues a little more in depth than I would be able to otherwise. I'm going to forums and I'm talking to people when I'm out block walking, but I wanted to be able to do something where I could go into depth for a couple minutes instead of having to can answers into 30 seconds. So if you live in this district and you want to know more about what I think, check out the channel. There's some other videos on it. Today what I want to talk to you about is immigration. I've been getting a lot of questions on immigration, and a lot of the candidates kind of feel like, well, their method for immigration is the only thing, so here's mine. But before I go into it too much, I want to preface this for those of y'all who don't know. I was a police officer. Most of my law enforcement experience comes from an area outside of Houston. And a lot of it during the Obama administration when the border, especially the Texas border, was basically porous. And what was happening is we were having guys would basically pick up a bunch of illegals on this side of the Mexican border, load them up in the back of a pickup and drive them down I-10 to Houston. Houston is the fourth largest city in the country, and there's a lot of human trafficking that goes through there. Now, a lot of people would think that by the time you get to Houston, border control is not a big issue. It was a huge one. In Austin County, at one point, we were averaging a chase of a car full of illegals every single day. And we'd chase them, they'd ditch somewhere, all the illegals would run. We'd try to catch the drivers, the human smugglers, which is what they were. And that was easier said than done because a lot of times what would happen is they'd take the shoes off the illegals. Now, one of the problems we ran into is we started noticing after a while that it was mostly men we were catching. Very rarely did we get a female from 12, 13 to, 50 in that bracket. Now, we've since discovered that a lot of them were being put into sex trafficking. Most of the illegals that were being brought in were not, the illegals themselves were coming over for a better life. However, the traffickers had other plans for them. These poor guys had families rounding up $5,000, $6,000 to get them over here, to get them somewhere they'd been promised a job. And it wasn't just from Mexico. You got to remember, everybody thinks when we talk about Texas border that it's an issue between the U.S. and Mexico. Well, if y'all watched the news last year, y'all probably recall there were a whole lot of Central American migrants headed up this way. We had routinely caught Hondurans, caught them from Guatemala, other places like that. Now, something else I'm going to point out to you is we weren't just getting illegals from Mexico. And I don't mean the odd one-off where we catch some kid from somewhere else. No, I mean routinely. We'd find loads 16, 17 or more loaded up in the back of a Chevy Suburban or an F-150, and none of them were even from this hemisphere. I can remember one day we got a group of them. They were largely from India and Bangladesh. But we had a Pakistani, Afghan, we had a kid from, I believe it was Syria, another one from Egypt. And on another case, we had so many people from the Indian subcontinent, which by the way has like 24 recognized dialects to their languages, that, as crazy as this may sound, we couldn't figure out even what language they spoke, where they were from. We actually rounded up some convenience store clerks that we were friendly with from that area, who actually helped us figure out. I mean, even if they didn't speak the language, they could nail it down for us. And this became a routine thing. If you look at the numbers that Border Patrol has, they're routinely getting migrants coming in from places like the Middle East. Same places that they're getting them in Europe with all the refugees they've had going there. Africa, China is a big country. Now, I want to see good, strong border control for a couple reasons. One, the obvious. Just from a general public safety point of view, we need to know who's coming in this country. We need to know if they're criminals. I mean, if people want to come to America, work hard, and make a life for themselves, just like my great-grandparents did when they came over here, well, at least on my mom's side, the others came over a long time before that, but they were all immigrants. They came here, they scraped out a living, they made a life for themselves, and provided a better living for their kids. Hey, welcome to America. But we need to make sure we're not bringing in criminals. We're not bringing in drugs. We need to get a grip on the border because one of the things we easily overlook is the human trafficking aspect. We are every day in America busting open another sex trafficking ring. Every day we're finding another sweatshop where illegals have been put to work and are put into forced labor. We've got to get on top of that. It's a humanitarian issue for the people coming across. And the only way we're going to get a grip on it is by locking down the border and making sure people have to come through ports of entry, airports, on foot, whatever, but through a legitimate port of entry. That's something we have to do. Yes, I absolutely believe we should build a wall. I agree that it's not the solution to everything because the Sinaloa cartel, for those of you who don't know, El Chapo, who ran it for a while, actually got his start smuggling drugs in via tunnels that he dug under the border. But it's still a good way to do it. We can lock a lot of it down. Let's also consider that a lot of American goods, especially vehicles, but also equipment, are being stolen and transported into Mexico. I worked a case one time where we had a couple 18-wheeler gas trucks that were stolen. And there were a ring of guys that were going around, and they were driving these trucks and trailer combinations back to Mexico where they could be sold at a very heavy profit. We have a lot of our stuff being taken back to Mexico, but we have had for many years a porous border. I mean, my compliments to President Trump for getting on top of that. And I've worked in the recent years out in Midland, Odessa, and parts to the south and to the west, where I work very closely along the border in the oil and gas industry. And border control was, especially where there wasn't even a river in the way, border control was a major issue for us. We were consistently having people come over, steal things from our sites, equipment, things like that. A lot of it ended up in Mexico. These are issues we've got to deal with. We're one of the few countries on earth with as weak a border control as we have. Border control, not border patrol, but as weak a border control. We've got to give immigrations and customs the funding they need. I know there are a lot of people that feel bad for immigrants that are saying we need to do away with ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. Right here, I will tell you that I will be a massive supporter of ICE. One of the things I found disgusting dealing in law enforcement is having to deal with people that were being smuggled in or forced into slavery, especially sexual slavery. Immigrations and Customs is the #1 federal agency for going after them. And I've got their back. Border Patrol, too, needs to be funded and have people added to it. And we need to do that immediately. President Trump has done a fairly good job with it, but we need to stay on top of that because they need the people, the resources, and the equipment they need to do the job right. That border's got to get locked down. You're also going to see me approaching border control from a public safety, public health standpoint. Now, for those of y'all who don't know, and I researched this with the CDC and looked at government statistics to make sure that anything I told you was true. But routinely, we're running into issues from illegal immigrants coming into this country. In fact, right now, over half of the tuberculosis cases are from immigrants coming into this country, most of them illegally. But some other diseases that they found along the Texas-U.S. border, or the Mexico-U.S. border. Leprosy. You know, until I became a police officer and dealt with Border Patrol, I actually thought leprosy was a thing in the Bible. I have to admit my ignorance. I didn't know that it even still existed in the modern world. It does, and it can be found routinely along the Mexican border. Polio, smallpox, as I mentioned, tuberculosis, I could go on. Those are diseases that are being brought in because people are coming from countries, most of them are third world countries, are not necessarily the kind of places where people are getting doctor checkups when they need them. Right now, if you guys are watching the news, as of today, of course, a few minutes ago, there are 800 cases in China of the new coronavirus popping up. It's spreading. It's moving quick enough. It's going to look like SARS or some of the others. And China's actually locked down cities with 20 million people in them, trying to get control on that. Now, eventually, that's something we need to consider is going to come across that border. Because remember, Border Patrol actually catches, I believe it's the third most common nationality coming into the U.S. illegal is Chinese. And we need to stay on top of that because we think that we have things like polio eradicated or smallpox, but yet they keep popping up, and usually that's because of illegal immigration. Now, I hope you understand my reasons for wanting to make sure we have solid border control are intended from a humanitarian point of view, ours and anybody coming into the country. I want to see that also extended to things like cargo containers, your commercial ports of entry. Because understand, right now, the highest statistic I've seen, I want to give the government credit where it's due, is they're searching about 3% of those big containers that come in. That's just pop a lock looking at them. Well, if you're a criminal sneaking stuff into the U.S., having a 97% guaranteed success rate, probably not bad. We've got to get on top of that. we've had fear since 9/11 that somebody would sneak in something like a dirty bomb or a biological weapon. If we don't get a grip on our commercial ports and our airports, that's probably going to happen. Hopefully not, but we've got to do a better job securing our ports of entry. Southern border, northern border. A few years back, a fella actually tried to enter illegally into the U.S. on the northern border. I believe it was Washington State. And his goal was to go down to Los Angeles and blow up the air traffic control while planes were in the air. Now, he was caught, thank God. But eventually somebody, if we don't lock down our borders and really make sure we know who's coming in this country, somebody's going to succeed with it. Anyway, I'm going to be a big supporter of border control. You're going to see me back in Border Patrol, ICE, Homeland Security at every opportunity I get. And it's not because I don't like immigrants. I work with them regularly in the oil field. I do. I respect very little more than people that will come to a country in a place they don't know anybody, in a language they don't speak, learn the language, and really try to make a life for themselves. I respect that a lot. But we do need to know who's coming in. And we need to make sure they're getting the health screenings that they need to make sure everything's cared for. And that they're not affecting anybody here. We need to make sure criminals are kept out. Anyway, I hope this answers a few of the questions that people have asked me as I'm out and about. And I also encourage you, if you're interested in other issues, to take a look at my other videos. Once again, I'm Matt MacArthur. I'm running for Texas 13th Congressional District, and I hope for your consideration on March 3rd. Thank you.